Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for watching the Storytelling Alchemist show here on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Tonight, I have some pretty incredible guests to come on the show, and we're going to be talking about the art of relationships. But I'd tell you a little bit about Marcus and Sheila Gillette. They were working together for over 25 years. They've been educating the world and people about worldwide intimate conversations, and they work. Sheila is the channel for a collective consciousness or a collective of archangels, and we call them THEO. So, and this happened to her. I'm going to ask her a lot of questions about this, but as a result of a near-death experience she had back in 1969. And anybody who's followed my show knows I am all about studying into the phenomenon of the near-death experience. So please welcome my guests, Marcus and Sheila Gillette.
Jeremy, thank you for having
Hey,
us.
hi, Marcus, Sheila, how are you?
Thanks, Sheila. Nick of time here.
Perfect, divine timing and divine order, right?
Indeed. Indeed.
So thank you for coming on the show tonight and talking with me about with our guests about your work and the work you do with THEO. I guess to kind of start off with, because my guests don't necessarily know, some of them might know who THEO is. Could you talk a little bit about THEO and the archangels that work through you and how that ended up happening? I mean, I mentioned a little bit that happened as a result of a near-death experience, but could you go in a little bit more in depth with that? Hi, Sheila. How are you? I didn't even say it.
I think we're having a little. She can't hear you. Sheila, we can hear you. You can't hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I cannot hear you.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll just start off with a question. Maybe Marcus, how you guys started working together and came together as a result and doing your work together.
Yeah, I'll tell you my part of the story while we're waiting for Sheila's audio to kick in on her speakers on her side. Let's see, 27 years ago, Jeremy, I was given a book by the name of The Fifth Dimension: Channels to a New Reality, which was Sheila's first book with THEO that was published by Simon & Schuster back in 1988. Series of synchronicities, wonderful, crazy stories that occurred that got me to that point where that book was given to me, which we talk a lot about in the beginning of our book. That book changed my life. And when Sheila came to town about 2 years later to do a speaking engagement, that mutual friend that had given me Sheila's first book, that was a friend of hers from Santa Fe, New Mexico, invited me. She called me up. She said, Sheila's coming to town to do a speaking engagement. Would you like to meet her? And I said, yeah, I'd love to meet her. And I'd love to come meet THEO and, have the experience, because the book was amazing and it kind of changed my life, as a matter of fact. You know how those books show up when you need them the most, right? It's a perfect thing. And so we showed up. We showed up on the patio of the Phoenician Resort here in Paradise Valley. And we just had this amazing connection that took place. I went and saw Sheila live the next night. And then the next day, which was 2 days later, which was a Sunday, we got together in a small gathering. I had a chance to meet THEO kind of more on a personal basis. And then from there, we became great friends. And a month later, I took her down to the Havasupai Indian Reservation in the bottom of the Grand Canyon on a vision quest for 5 days. We went on a camping trip on our very first date for 5 days, which I don't necessarily recommend, Jeremy, to most people. But we're very fortunate that we had an amazing time. We came back, we got engaged, and literally that night we made a commitment. We got back after 5 days of being camping together, and we decided to spend the rest of our lives and work together. That was in 1997. Let me check in with Sheila. Can you hear us, Sheila?
Well, she's smiling. I think she can hear.
It looks like she might be muted, so I just want to see if. Okay, we're almost there. But that's all. There you go.
Yeah, I can hear you. I had to unplug everything. It seemed like it, but this is working. You can hear me fine, correct?
Yeah, we hear you fine. It's perfect.
Hi, Jeremy. It's really good to be with you.
Hi, Sheila. Thanks for being on the show. And I have to
Abs-
say, they say that if you find out, how do you find out if you're going to be with somebody? Go on vacation with them. And you just, Marcus just knocked it out of the park right there.
Yeah, yeah, he did.
Because if you can't get along with them in a vacation, then you probably won't get along with them.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? Yeah,
So,
he came out after our camping trip, and we were at his home. I was living in Colorado at the time. We went back to his house, and after meeting with a group of people, we were sitting outside, and he said, "Well, what are we going to do on our second date?" And I said, "I don't date." And he said, "I guess we're going to have to get married." And that's what we did. So a
that's
year
wonderful.
later. Yeah.
Jeremy, have you ever had the experience where words start coming out of your mouth and you have absolutely no idea where they came from? None,
Yes.
like not a clue, but you knew they were the truth and may not have necessarily been your physical being speaking those words. But that's what came out of my mouth that night. And it's been it's been amazing ever since then, quite frankly.
When those moments happen, I always say that is my soul or my higher self talking. And I have that happen in just normal conversations with people, but when I'm on stage speaking, I'll walk off the stage and think, what did I just, I won't remember a word I said, but I don't
Yes.
necessarily think I channel anything, but something's happening.
I totally understand. Well, you are in some way, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, so THEO, collective of archangels. From what I understand, they don't necessarily identify which archangels, but they're a consciousness. Um,
Mhm.
so do they, you're a trans channel.
Mhm.
Is there a different, just real quick, is there a different, do they take over your consciousness in a sense? Like Ramtha, I know,
Yes,
takes over Jay-Z Knight's body. Do they
yes,
do that?
yes. When I started doing this 5 decades ago in 1969, um, I was completely in a trance and laying down like Edgar Casey. And
Mhm.
over the years, it's evolved to where they just take over my body and use it and speak directly through me. I don't remember everything. To your point, I don't remember what's said. I am aware that it's going on. And because I've been doing it so long, it's a comfortable place for me to allow. I've had enough experience with it and trust completely the information and also the experience of it.
I think that's a great segue to talking about your trust with THEO and even in relationships. Because I know you guys talk about, first of all, in relationships, you have to be kind of you have to work on yourself, right?
Yes.
We're not just talking about, I'm assuming, just intimate relationship or romantic relationship, but the relationships in general, in a sense, because one of the questions I really thought about asking you is like, I really feel like, especially in the last couple of years, people's relationship to themselves has been challenged because everything else, but it's also a good thing because they're alchemizing themselves into a higher state of consciousness. They're either are or they not, or they're not. But I think they're being pushed. And what is both of your take on that as far as
Well, well, certainly, the relationship to the self is first and foremost because you really can't have a relationship with someone else if you don't have one with yourself. And, over many, many thousands of years, many of the master teachers have said you have to love yourself. Well, what does that mean? But it means letting go of the belief that we're not enough, that we're not lovable, we're not worthy. And that's what Theo's here to teach us, give us tools of how to love ourselves, how to know what that means, and rewriting the script of those limiting beliefs of not enoughness, not worthy, that we've adopted by others' opinions or were created in a situation or circumstance that challenged us in our life that we judged ourselves harshly for. So, and we all have it. I mean, it's been the human condition. But now we're moving into this fifth dimensionary time, which is a tremendous shift of consciousness that's never happened before. And THEO brought forth a teaching called soul integration, the soul integration process, on how to get in touch with that aspect of our soul that created or adopted that belief about us personally that's simply untrue. And the events and circumstances in that moment of that creation won't change. That's our history. But our perception will change. We can change our perception. We can change that belief, and we can look for the gifts and blessings of those moments that have made us the person we are today. And then we can love ourselves through that into the now, which gives us more confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you think that, so there's been especially over the last 100 years, from Edgar Casey to you to many other people that have brought, I guess, a collective consciousness. Edgar Casey had 14,000 different readings of different things.
Mhm.
Is this a part of bringing the consciousness of the planet up? Because things especially in the last 100 years, technology's gone up. I mean, the way we connect with people just I mean, the fact that we're all in different parts of the country and we're on camera and we're practically at the Jetsons. Yeah. Now it's like we don't have holograms. Do you think that the reason why these entities came in so strongly, or these consciousness came in so strongly, is because we needed the help to get over that hump, to raise the frequency?
Absolutely. I have no doubt about it. And they've even said so. They're here to assist us in changing these perceptions and going into a new consciousness that's never happened on this planet before. That we're now, as a species, available to that change. And yes, to your point of what's happened over the last 100 years is evidence of that. We are a global species. And that there is a oneness. It doesn't matter the color of our skin, the language we speak, the religion we're experiencing. We're all the same in these human bodies. And we've come here for this time to shift consciousness. And each and every one of us is a soul having a human experience, not the other way around. And that our soul is much larger than our physical body. And much more powerful. And we tend to think the flip of that, the opposite of that we're a human having a sacred or spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Because as THEO has taught us, energy is constant, which our soul is energy. And it's only form that changes, and that we choose to incarnate. And those of us who have chosen to be here now, have chosen to be here for this shift of consciousness, to experience, to become it, to be examples for it.
Yeah, I've just noticed that, especially in my lifetime. I was just talking with somebody. We were talking about the different things that are talked about, from conspiracies to what churches are teaching, to what us as spiritual people are teaching and stuff like that. And I'm looking at my 48 years of life on the planet from the 70s forward, and I'm sitting there looking, and just in my 48 years, things have changed drastically, and I think for the better. And then I think what we're going through right now is the tower card and the tarot, where everything is collapsing down upon us until we go into that new state of consciousness, and you have to tear down the old in order to bring in the new. And so
That's exactly what THEO's been teaching for 5 decades. My first book, The Fifth Dimension, spoke about this time. The fifth dimension channels to a new reality, and now we're living it. And THEO says to us, out of this chaos will come order, but we're birthing a new world. We're birthing a new way of being in the world. And so birth is messy and a little painful sometimes, but the outcome is magnificent.
Yeah.
We have a new human being in a human birthing process, or any other species that's magnificent. but we're birthing a new way of being in the world as human beings. And the integrated process, Theo says, is everybody in the world would do soul integration, the soul integrational process, we'd have peace. Because once we learn to love ourselves, we can then exhibit love to others, and we treat each other appropriately.
Yeah,
So
this path that Sheila's talking about, Jeremy, this path of soul integration, the premise of it is very simple, that any thought or belief that we have about ourselves that is anything other than unconditionally loving is simply not true. So imagine if every thought, every belief that we had, we knew in that moment that that was an untrue belief about ourselves, and we could in that moment pattern and completely repattern and shift that and rewrite the script of that belief, knowing that it wasn't true to begin with. Imagine your life, what it would be like. And this goes back, this is not just, people talk about it being a combination of shadow work or inner child work and the psychological models. And it is that, it's getting in touch with experiences in this lifetime. It's also has shades of shamanic soul retrieval. And it is that as well, but it's more than that. It's multidimensional. It taps into previous incarnations and beliefs that were formed, that were adopted in the human experience, that have carried forward into this lifetime and that now reside in the emotional body that create, that contribute to creating feelings of not worthy, not enough, and resistance and fear, lack of trust, and so forth. So what Theo's teaching us, to your point earlier, we can either accept it or resist it. We know there's a lot of chaotic, discordant, confusing energy on the planet right now. Like you said, old ways are crumbling, but the new that's emerging with this new awareness of and remembrance of who we really are is what makes the extraordinary become our new ordinary.
no, that makes sense, because I've always felt like this physical body is like an epicenter of all aspects of who you are, multidimensional. And when I clear something, I always say I'm clearing this in all dimensions of myself, in all realms of myself, in all time, in all past incarnations or future carnations, and incarnations, I guess is the best way to put it. And because I always felt like if I'm going to clear it here, I have the choice to say, no, this is not true on all levels. And so, is that kind of the way you're talking about with soul integrations and just kind of eliminating those, I guess, blocks or barriers from allowing the soul to come in oneness with all of who you are? I guess that's the best way to put it.
That's well said, Jeremy. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
24 years of practice.
Yeah, it is a practice, isn't it? And it truly is. It has been for me all these years, is just being a student and a participant in this change.
I think it's exciting times, very, very exciting times. And so now going into some of the questions I'm going to be asking about the book, should we have Theo come in for that, or would it be better to just stay as author?
I think for the book, it would be really great to ask Marcus
Okay.
a bunch of questions about the book. He has been the supreme editor. So of any of us, he would be the one to best answer any question you might have about that.
So I guess
I would definitely add to that, Jeremy. Yes, you're welcome to talk to Theo about it.
Yes,
for sure. Absolutely.
No, of course. I just want. I guess my first question is that in the art of relationships, how did this come about in the beginning? Like, is this a lifelong work that you finally worked with Theo and then finally wrote a book, or how did that kind of head in this direction? Because it's obviously coming out at a right time. So
yeah. Well, about 3.5 years ago, we asked Theo, of all of your teachings, all the pillars of life that your teachings impact, what's the most important one for us to focus on in terms of creating the next book, audio program, online course, and so forth? And they said relationships. They didn't even hesitate. And it all starts with the self, the relationship to the self, which is what we've been talking about since we began the show here with you. And so this book is a culmination of 50 years of Theo's teachings on the topic of relationships. And when I asked Theo, as never having been incarnated, as angelic beings who have never been in human form, why are you so expert? Why are you so wise in the realm of relationships? And they said, we're very, very good observers of the human experience. So they see us, and they say that if we could see ourselves as they see us, there would be no discontent. There'd be no worry. There would only be love and joy. And so they're reminding us, and many people who work with us and work with THEO and various mentoring programs and so forth that we have with THEO, comment that THEO always seems to hold me in the brightest, highest light of possibility and potential. They don't see the circumstances and conditions that we all see, that we perceive somehow as holding us back or being being blockages, if you will, to moving forward and being and doing and having and becoming and creating that which we really desire and would love to do. And so this book, in the beginning of the book, we tell our multidimensional love story is the name of the chapter, which we just touched on a little tiny bit here to begin. Then we move into the next 3 chapters are all about loving the self, how to love the self, how it expresses. The first one is the sacred self, which talks about who we really are. The third chapter in the book is on soul integration, the path to loving yourself, this process that we're talking about. And the 4th chapter is how loving yourself changes everything. And then we move into romantic relationships, healing from betrayal, families, communication. We have a chapter called Haven't We Met Somewhere Before? We have a chapter called How in the World Did I End Up in This Family? You know, because a lot of people, I know you know them, who consider themselves to be, you know, a bit of the black sheep of the family because they have a different perception, a different way of perceiving, a different worldview, a different experiences, quite frankly, right? Where, you know, we tell people all the time come into our community, look, you're not crazy, you're just psychic. You know, you're just having a spiritual experience. And so for us, that was the impetus for us to create this book. And the other thing we do in the book, which is kind of interesting, Jeremy, that we've had a lot of positive feedback on, is that we invite people who have worked with THEO to, on a one-on-one basis, to contribute their sessions and their stories that can join with the various topics that are included in the chapter. So it's not just theoretical, it's very experiential, where people can see themselves. You know, they can see themselves in the stories of others. After listening to THEO's teachings on a particular topic, we put it into action, if you will. And there's an experience that people can read about, and then the follow-up story of how that experience with THEO regarding that topic in their lives actually, you know, impacted their life going forward. And so we wanted to try to make it as, like I said, as experiential as we possibly could.
No, that makes a lot of sense, especially this personal stories, because a lot of times we read a book and we're like, well, okay, this is great. This is a great process. And now that I've seen other people's stories that have gone through it, it makes it a lot easier for me to change it because we learn through exactly what you said through experience.
Yeah.
So
we also have romantic relationships. We have healing. We have sacred separation. You know, how to honorably separate from our partners, whether it be romantic, whether it be family, whether it be professional, whatever it is. We talk about the energy of all that with THEO, you know, so people can understand there's a new and more honorable, sacred way of actually ending one relationship. And the energy of that is always going to have an immediate and significant impact on the energy of starting the next relationship and whatever it is that, whatever type of relationship we're talking about.
I'm sorry, Sheila, you were going to say something.
I was just going to add a little bit too, and now he's gone beyond it, and it flew out my head. So carry on.
I'm sorry.
You're totally fine. Because my next question is about that. You know, I guess I'll start it off with just a quick personal story because I had ended a relationship in 2006 and then waited 11 years before I was actually in another type of dating romantic relationship. Then ended up in a relationship, and that ended not very long after it started. What I noticed though is how I responded was drastically different in 2006 than it was in 2017 because I'd grown as a person. And so where I was just like, of course there was a part of me that was on the physical self was like a little disappointed, but then I was more, instead of getting upset and flying off the handle, I was very loving, and we've actually developed an amazing friendship as a result of that. Is there, how do I say it, a codependency that is unhealthy in relationships that is affecting the modern day, not just romantic, well, mainly romantic, but just friendship and family relationships? And do you think that's causing problems within relationships in our modern day society?
Well, I think they always have.
Yeah.
Everything's relational. Everything we do is in relationship base, right? Even going through the line at the market to pay for our groceries, we're
Mhm.
having a relationship with the person that's checking our groceries out. We're having a relationship anytime we're interacting with others. And so whatever's on the inner of us is a projection externally. So that's why loving the self is so important, because when you have that solid state of being, Theo calls it soul centeredness, we respond to life differently than in a reactive state of victimization. And the old way of being is life is happening to me. You know, this happened to me, rather than recognizing that our soul is directing everything and life is happening through us and for us as opportunities of expansion and growth. When we change that perception, just a little bit, it's like the thermostat in our house. When we change the degree, whichever direction, we change the environment. Well, when we change our perception of just recognizing that life is happening for us and through us, as us, then we change the trajectory of our life and our relationships out of being victimized by them into empowered, uh, interactive, communicative relationships. Um, we're moving out of those old paradigms, those old belief systems. We're changing the script. And, it's all about recognizing where we are and coming into that state, and then interacting in our world in a very different way.
Mm. Yeah, I think you said something there powerful. One of the things that the personal relationship to yourself does is exactly, if something happens, if the relationship ends, you don't take it personally, of course, like you mentioned, and you start realizing that, hey, this is the time for it to end. And then I think it's there's a spiritual principle that says if it was meant to be, then you can't lose it anyways. It'll
Mhm.
come back around. And so I think that there's such a fear of, and I think it comes back to something you said in the beginning, that we don't feel worthy of love, or we don't think we're lovable. And so that's kind of the nature of what's causing issues in all of our lives, is that we don't necessarily feel lovable, but we don't even love ourselves. So,
That's true. And that's what, that how we deal with life is we react to it. And reaction comes from that lack of self love,
yeah.
that we're being victimized by life. And so when we do a process of recognizing and developing that self love, then we shift from reaction to response. We're not in that knee jerk having to protect ourselves, that we're more open and receptive and communicative with those around us. And this affects primary relationships, family relationships, work relationships, all relationships. And that's what the Art of Relationship book addresses, that, as I said, everything's relationship based. We go to work, we're in relationships at work. It's like Theo says, we don't hang our soul up in the closet when we go to work. Everything's sacred. Everything is spiritual,
Mhm.
because we're on a spiritual journey in this human existence.
So let's go back to something you guys both said, is that if we were to have this work on soul integration,
Mhm.
that we would not, and if we were to look at the world as Theo looks at the world, then we wouldn't have the issues that we're having, or the problems, or the strife and stuff like that. Well, let me ask this: is there a purpose to where the planet has been up to this point? the codependency, the pain that we've been suffering? Is there a purpose? Because this is a discussion that a lot of people I've had with people. I said, well, maybe there's a purpose. The reason why we went through that, because pearls don't form through friction. So,
Yeah. And it's diamonds are formed in the heat of the earth,
Yeah.
So, of course, there is. And what we've been taught by THEO is that we've come here to be humans to experience emotions. And we have these beautiful human earth suits that we have all our senses in which we can experience those emotions. And, we confuse emotions and feelings, but feelings are a visceral experience. It goes through our nervous system. We feel a feeling, and then it goes into our brain, and our brain deciphers what that feeling is, and then energy in motion emotes whatever, happiness, fear, sadness, whatever the emotion is that emanates from us as we react to that stimulus.
I could talk about this probably for the next 3 hours, but we don't have that. What from your experience working with THEO for 5 decades, and based on this current work, what would be some last minute advice that you would give the viewers?
What I would say to everybody is you came here, you chose to be here. And each and every one of us came here to be significant. And each and every one of us is. And we're on that road of self-discovery to know what that is. And so being present in our lives, our soul will show us. I can't tell you how many people say, well, what's my purpose? Well, your purpose is life. You've come to live this life. You won the lottery. You got a body. There's billions of souls that are looking to have this experience, and we get to do it. It's quite exquisite. And to embrace those opportunities of growth rather than resist them, and really embrace all the emotions. We're trying to avoid the uncomfortable ones. We try to avoid them at all costs. Truly, we don't want to feel sad or grief or uncomfortable. About the only emotion that's acceptable on that spectrum of the emotional rainbow is anger. We can all go into anger because that's something we're okay with. But all those other ones that make us uncomfortable, like sadness and grief and all those things that come in waves, we try to avoid those. And so if we can just embrace them all, like THEO says, you don't take the color orange out of the rainbow. You wouldn't experience the whole spectrum of color and beauty. So it's the same with our emotional experience here. And we have this unique human experience because we have a body that can feel those emotions. And we have, how about touch, hugging somebody, kissing somebody? That's an exquisite experience that we don't have when we're not in a body. So I think we can appreciate those things if we just think of it differently.
Yeah, there's another part of this too that THEO's been talking quite a bit about lately, Jeremy, and that is stop taking ourselves so seriously, right? I asked THEO recently, what do you find amusing about us? And they said everything basically. You guys you humans take yourselves so seriously, and you don't find the funny in yourselves. You tend to take things a little personally. You tend to look at life the way, unlike how they look at us, making the same mistakes over and over again, with having the same thinking we're going to have some kind of a different outcome somehow, not finding how funny we really are in our interactions with other human beings. If you could step outside yourselves and see yourselves as we see you, you would find yourselves pretty funny. You'd find your behaviors pretty funny, And so it's just, and they said, we had a conversation today about looking through the eyes of the child, looking at life with that awe and that wonderment as a child does. We get to into our adult years, and life kind of starts, we start carrying the burdens around with us and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to do that anymore. We can be that childlike, have that amazement, that wonderment, and just step out of ourselves and find ourselves as funny as we typically are. And once we start laughing with and at ourselves, everything can change. You won't find it. You'll find it virtually impossible to take anything personally anymore.
That's why Seinfeld was so popular.
Funny, yeah.
The sitcoms of just witnessing life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And friendships and interactions. And like I told Marcus, I wanted to make a sitcom out of my life because I have that funny lens that I can see things through, that even in the most difficult of times, I kind of put my eye behind the camera going, if I was watching this in a movie, it would be hysterical.
Yep.
The way, because those are the things we find funny in those TV shows or comedy movies. It's just people doing silly things in life, and it happens every day.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys remember a show called What's in Herman's Head from the 80s?
I remember the show. I can't say that I watched it, but I remember hearing about it.
So I've always said that what's going on inside of my brain is a divine comedy. And that's
Right.
basically what's going on in Herman's head, because I have this since I've been doing my inner work, I have this very gentle, loving voice that comes in. I've always said it's just my soul. And then I have the one that's worrying all the time, and they have this kind of dialogue that goes back, and sometimes I just laugh because there's no other way to think about it. It's like you really just were a jerk in that moment, but it was inside of your head, and you just giggle. That's all you can do. And so I find life pretty entertaining most of the time. And do I hit new levels of consciousness, and I have a challenge at that point? Yeah, but then I look back and be like, that wasn't as hard as you thought it was.
Isn't it interesting, the things I learned years ago, because I kept trying to avoid feeling uncomfortable and facing the challenges like everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the time I made a conscious choice of not avoiding the hard stuff. Mm-hmm. I sat, because I asked THEO one time, I said, why am I having to go through this? Because everybody says, oh, you have these archangels that work with you. It must be easy. No, I get to work on myself just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I was going through a particular hard challenge at the time. And I said, why do I have to go through this? And THEO said, so you can learn compassion. And it made sense to me in that moment. I thought, oh, okay. And in that moment, I made the decision, rather than trying to avoid those challenges, if they were there for me to learn something from them, I was going to squeeze every drop of learning out of it immediately. And what I found is it got easier, because in avoiding it, it just got larger and more difficult in my head. Mm-hmm. And it never went away. So when I just said, okay, it's here for me to do and learn, I just grabbed a hold of it and hugged it tight and just said, let's go. Let's learn whatever we have to learn. And it was an amazing transformation that happened inside of me, that I realized in that resistance to what you said about being in your head, that all the boogeymen out of that challenge were in my head. That if I just confronted, which means face directly, that challenge, it wasn't as difficult as I imagined it to be.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, this has been incredible. And I just want to point out to everybody that their website is asktheo.com. But is that where you would find the book, or would that be just on Amazon, or how would
Yeah.
they find?
Yeah, they can pre-order the book on our website at SEO.com right now. The ebook, actually, the best thing right now, we're actually releasing the book to the public on September 21st. So there's pre-orders for the book available on our site right now. And after the 21st, there'll also be ebooks available. But if you go to our site, there's some bonuses when you pre-register. We've got some guided meditations and some additional resources. We have a live event that we're doing for all those that have pre-ordered the book as well, a live THEO event on the art of relationship, and some other cool stuff there. But the website's a good place right now. Yeah.
Perfect. And everybody, this has been an incredible show. And hopefully when Marcus and Sheila come out with their next book, they'll come back on the show again. But next week, I have William Branham coming on. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he's actually helping military veterans with their PTSD and doing a lot of great work with that. So that's to look forward to next week. So last question, I'll just throw this out there. What's next for THEO, Sheila, and Marcus beyond this book? Is there any other projects going beyond this, or what do you think is going to happen?
There's always projects, Marcus.
Yeah. We're just right now, Jeremy, we're going with the flow. We're really enthusiastic about getting this book out to the world. We've worked a lot of years on this book. It's been a labor of love, of course, as you know, everything that you can put out to the world that's transformative and can have impact. We're super excited about, we're just finishing up the filming for the online course, the video training program of the book, and the creation of the audio book. And we are just moving forward with doing our work with THEO. We have several mentoring programs, 3, 6, and 12-month mentoring programs. We do a lot of complimentary live events to introduce people to THEO. We have a membership that monthly subscription with hundreds of hours of videos and audio programs for people to really engage with THEO's teaching. So we're just putting one foot in front of the other. Really enthusiastic about meeting people like yourself, being on a lot of shows and podcasts and getting the information out to the world, because we're watching in our community the impact, how lives are changing with those that are embracing THEO's teachings on self-love. It's just discovering the magic of what self-love really, really means, of unconditional love. So it's just, like I said, one foot in front of the other, and keep open and receptive to the opportunities, and then the creation of new and more content. The pillars of our distribution, if you will, of THEO's teachings is relationships, self-love, manifestation, of course, really tapping into all the universal laws. And then Sheila has a wonderful, decades-long international reputation as a mentor to mentors for those that are opening up psychically. And so we have several programs we do around spiritual and psychic exploration with THEO, online programs and retreats and so forth, for people that really want to experience themselves as so much more than their physical bodies. So we've created a community for people to come in who are having experiences, who are definitely moving beyond the third dimensional 5-sensory reality that we felt limited by for so long. And they're able to come in and find their people in our community that are having the same kinds of experiences they are, And so that's our love. That's what we're doing, is creating that community and allowing people to come in and be who they really, really are, and to grow and expand psychically and spiritually.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for doing your work and what you're doing for humanity. It's definitely very much needed. And thank you for, I guess, hearing the call of your soul. And much love. And everybody, thank you again for tuning into the show. And it's been very much a blessing.
Much love to you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.